everyone, welcome to your first lesson in AP Psychology. This is Miss Desario, and today we're going to focus on the introduction to psychology. So your objective for today is that you will be able to recognize how philosophical and psychological perspectives shape the development of psychological thought. So essentially we're going to look at the history of psychology and how psychology became what it is today. So what is psychology? What does that mean? What does that look like? Well, psychology is the scientific study of behavior. So essentially we're going to take a look at what do we do and the mental process. So this is your inner thoughts, memories, and feelings. And we take a look at not just humans, but of all organisms. So we're looking at what is it that you do and what's your thought process behind that action. So what did philosophy and physiology have to do with psychology? Well, for philosophy, we have John Locke sitting right here. He was one of our philosophers. And if we take a look at the definition of, we're going to move this over just a tiny bit there. The definition of philosophy is the rational study, and we're actually going to move that over there. Okay. The rational study of knowledge and human existence. And we combine that with the idea of physiology. And physiology is going to be the study of living animals or beings. And we really look at the body. And so that's what we have over here, right? Is we have our view of the human body right there. So we take these things and we combine both of these things. And I'm just going to make that a little bit bigger so you guys can see both of those things at the same time. So we took these things, we took this idea of knowledge and human existence and the study of our body, and we started to combine these two ideas together. Some of the first philosophers to do this were actually Descartes and Plato. They were the first ones to take a look at this mind-body connection. And Locke viewed the mind as a blank slate. He believed that our mind was open for interpretation to create as what we want with it. So what happened was these two things eventually combined. And that is what made psychology, is combining these two ideas together. So the early schools of thought of psychology, these were some of the first people to study psychology, and so their knowledge was fairly limited and fairly basic. To the right here, you have a picture of Sigmund Freud, one of our very famous psychologists there with his dog, which is of some significance that we'll get to in just a moment here. But the very first school of thought was an idea called structuralism. And this was developed by a man named Wilhelm Wundt. You'll learn more about him tomorrow. And what he decided was what he developed was this concept of introspection. And this really just said that we all have a basic element of consciousness. So that just means when you're conscious of something, that just means awareness. Now, to us right now, that might sound pretty common sense, but at that point in time, it was a fairly new thought process that we all have this basic awareness of what's going on. And once we learned more, the schools of thought began to change. The second school of thought that we developed was functionalism. And functionalism was developed by a man named William James. And William James took this basic element of consciousness one step further. And he wanted to know, what is the purpose of the elements? So he believed in this idea of stream of consciousness, that our consciousness aren't just these elements, but they create this stream of awareness that you are aware of. Our third school of thought is Gestalt. You do not need to know any individuals with Gestalt theories. And they just believed that we had consciousness as a whole. So this was more important than the individual parts. And then really what took us from this jump of this just basic consciousness and awareness and what are we aware of was really the psychoanalytic theory and Sigmund Freud. This was Sigmund Freud, who we see here to the right. And Sigmund Freud believed that our behavior is actually caused by our unconscious. So that what we have in our unconscious impacts our behavior as we grow. Now, these we're going to go into more detail as we go through this course as a whole. So just having a basic understanding of what these terms means at the moment is what's most important. When we move through the course, we're going to apply these theories to topics in psychology, which will allow them to make more sense to you. So don't stress too much now, just have a basic understanding of what these terms mean. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the modern schools of thought. So these are the schools of thought that we still apply today and we still use today. Again, the idea here is to get the definitions and we will apply them to concepts as we move through this course. I'm also going to apologize if you can hear the ice cream truck in the background. We have an ice cream truck that visits the neighborhood, and so that's what you're hearing in the background at the moment. Okay, so the first is psychodynamic, and psychodynamic is interchangeable with psychoanalytic, so you will see these two used interchangeably, and that is completely okay. So again, the idea that we're focusing on the unconsciousness, we call this unconscious the id. It's going to autocorrect. The id, the ego, and the superego. And we're going to get into these later, but the idea being that the id is going to be like your innermost kind of like childhood behaviors, your selfishness almost. Your ego is your personality that we all see and know, and your superego is your like super conscientious, think about it like as like the good angel sitting on your shoulder type of a behavior. The second school of thought that we're going to take a look at is behavioralism. And this just means that behavior is learned. So if my 3-year-old son sees me do something, then he is probably going to do it as well because he's watching what I do and learning all those wonderful words that he should not be saying. The third school of thought is going to be our humanistic. If it lets me do this here. There we go. Okay. The third school of thought is humanistic. And this is this idea or belief that all humans are good. And we are always trying to reach our full potential. The cognitive thought process is saying is looking at how do you, or how do we really, process information. We are influenced by the way that we think, by our attitude, by our memories, by our expectations. So maybe last year you had a really good experience with virtual learning. So you're coming into this course with a really positive attitude, where somebody else maybe had a negative experience with virtual learning. So they may have a very different feeling about the same exact experience. And this is because of your cognitive thought process. Okay, the final modern schools of thought, the last 4 that we're going to cover. Again, the ice cream truck is still in the background, so my apologies if you hear that. The first school of thought is the next school of thought is your biological school of thought. And for biological, it is this idea that behavior is caused by changes in the nervous system functioning. So, for example, I get hangry. When I'm hungry, I might get a little bit angry. A psychologist may look at that as a biological. Maybe my blood sugar is dropping, maybe something else is going on chemically within my body, which is causing my attitude or my behavior to change. The next school of thought is going to be evolutionary. And this is the idea that we evolve as humans. Think Darwin here. The idea that we have natural selection is necessary for survival. Sociocultural. Sociocultural is this idea that your ethnicity will play a role in your behavior, your religion will play a role in your behavior, your gender identity will play a role in your behavior, your language, your nationality, your economic status, or anything that you would identify as part of your personal culture or your personal society is going to impact your behavior. This is also, all of these can also be very fluid, right? Depending on certain environments, this may change for you. The biopsychosocial model here is just taking 2 or more of any of these perspectives to explain your behavior. What we are realizing now is that behavior may not be easily explained by just one of these theories. So these are the major ways that we think about psychology today. This is what we use to explain behavior. Why is it that we do the things that we do? As I said, the idea for this lesson is just to give you a general idea of what these terms mean. We are going to apply these terms as we move through the course, and it's going to make a lot more sense to you. So just getting the basic idea today and then getting a better familiarization with this as we move through.